When you're 250 feet up, alone in a glass cab no bigger than a closet, the world below looks like a model village, and the world above is a vast empty sky. Tower crane operators have one of the most isolated jobs on Earth, and after enough night shifts, enough storms, enough hours staring into the dark, many of them start seeing things they can't explain. Tonight, we're climbing the ladder to bring you 5 true horror stories from crane operators across America. Stories that will make you grateful your feet are on solid ground. Hit that like button, subscribe, and whatever you do, don't look down. Caleb Prescott, a 35-year-old tower crane operator from Atlanta, Georgia, been working the night shift on a 55-story high-rise downtown for 6 months, and the loneliness of the cab had become almost meditative. The city lights spreading beneath him like a circuit board, the only sounds the hum of the hoist motor, and the occasional crackle of his two-way radio. But on a sweltering August night around 2:30 a.m., the job site below completely shut down and the street empty. He saw something that made every hair on his body stand on end. A figure, a human-shaped silhouette, climbing the external ladder on the mast of his crane, and this was impossible because the ladder was locked off at the base with a heavy steel gate and a padlock, and the site had 24-hour security, and no one, absolutely no one, should be climbing that ladder at this hour. And Caleb grabbed his radio and called down to the ground security guard, a guy named Terrence, and said, "Terrence, I've got someone climbing the mast. Did you let anyone through?" And the radio was dead, just a hissing static. And he banged on the glass and shouted. But the figure kept climbing, moving with a slow, deliberate mechanical motion. It's not like a person, but like something pretending to be a person. And as it got closer to the cab, about 50 feet below, Caleb grabbed his flashlight and aimed it down through the floor window. And the beam hit the climber, and what he saw made his blood freeze, because the climber had no face, just a smooth, pale expanse where features should be, and its limbs were too long, its joints bending at angles that made no anatomical sense, and it stopped climbing and looked up, not with eyes, but with the entire blank surface of its head, and it tilted that head and raised one too long arm, and waved a slow, deliberate, friendly wave. And then a voice came through the radio, a voice that was not Terrence, a voice that was a whispery, sibilant thing that said, "Caleb, we've been watching you up here. We see you every night. We see the little light in your cab. We see you drinking coffee from your thermos. We see you rubbing your eyes, and we decided tonight we'd come say hello. It's a long climb, but we're patient, and we're almost there." And Caleb looked down, and now there were more climbers. 5, 6, a dozen. All identical, all faceless, scaling the mast from every direction. And he did the only thing he could think of. He slammed the lock on the cab door, even though he knew they could probably break the glass if they wanted. And he grabbed the manual override for the crane's warning horn and pulled it. The horn blared across the empty city, a huge, mournful sound, and the climbers paused and their heads all swiveled toward the horn. And then, as if by some unspoken signal, they began to descend, not climb but flow. Like liquid, down the mast and into the darkness at the base of the crane. And when Terrence finally got on the radio asking what the hell that horn was about, Caleb couldn't explain. He just said there was a malfunction. But the next morning he climbed down and found something at the base of the crane. A single handprint pressed into the steel of the mast. A handprint that was far too large and had only 3 fingers, and the steel was cold to the touch even in the Georgia heat. and Caleb transferred to a ground job the next week. But sometimes when he's driving home late, he looks up at the cranes on the city skyline and sees those little lights in their cabs. He knows the climbers are still out there, still watching, still waiting for the night when someone doesn't lock the door. DeAndre Wainwright, a 41-year-old crane operator on a massive bridge construction project over the Mississippi River near Memphis, Tennessee, had been in the industry for 18 years, and he'd operated every type of crane from mobile to overhead to the big luffing jib tower cranes. And he'd never once been spooked until the night he started picking up a radio signal that didn't belong to any frequency on the job site, a faint, crackling voice that bled through his headset at exactly 3:33 a.m. every night for 2 weeks straight. And the voice was always the same, a woman's voice, calm and measured, saying things like, "Load is secure. Swing left. Slow now. Set it down gentle," as if she was directing a pick from somewhere on the ground. But there were no women on the night crew. The voice didn't match any of the signalers or riggers, and when DeAndre asked his supervisor about it, the supervisor said the radio channel was encrypted and nobody else could be on it. But the voice kept coming, and it started to get personal. It started to say things like, "DeAndre, you're tired tonight. I can see you rubbing your neck. You should take a break. And DeAndre, your daughter's recital is tomorrow. Don't forget the flowers." And DeAndre had never told anyone on the crew about his daughter's recital, and he was terrified. And on the 14th night, the voice said something different. "DeAndre, I'm not on the radio, I'm on the hook. Look at the hook." And he turned his cab and looked down at the massive steel hook hanging 100 feet below. And in the dim glow of the sight lights, he saw a figure clinging to the hook. A woman in a tattered yellow safety vest, her hair whipping in the wind, and she was looking up at him. She smiled, and the radio crackled, and she said, "I fell in '09, DeAndre, during the last bridge project. They never found my body because the current took it. But my voice stayed in the steel. I've been calling out on every frequency since. I've been trying to get someone to finish the lift I never finished. And tonight you're going to help me. You're going to lower me down to the water and I'm going to go home. If you don't, I'll keep talking. I'll talk until your ears bleed. I'll talk until you can't hear anything but me." And DeAndre, his hands shaking, swung the crane and lowered the hook toward the black, churning river below. And as the hook descended, the woman's form became fainter, more translucent. And when it touched the water, she dissolved into a plume of mist, and the radio went silent. And the next day, he checked the project logs and found that in 2009, during the construction of the original bridge, a female signaler named Etta had indeed fallen from the deck and drowned. Her body never recovered, and DeAndre finished the job. But every night at 3:33 a.m., he still hears a faint, grateful whisper on the wind. "Thank you, DeAndre. I'm home now." And he knows the steel remembers, and the radio never truly forgets. Maria Elena Vasquez, a 29-year-old tower crane operator working on a high-rise condo project in Seattle, Washington, was used to the marine layer that rolled in off the Puget Sound, blanketing the city in a thick, damp fog that reduced visibility to zero. But the fog that crept in on a Tuesday night in late October was different. Oh, it was too thick, too heavy, and it moved against the wind, pushing in from the east when the weather report said the wind was from the west, and as it enveloped her cab, she noticed it had a smell. A faint, sweet, rotten smell like flowers left too long in a vase. And the fog wasn't just outside, it was inside, seeping through the seals of the cab, curling around her ankles, and with it came a sound, a low rhythmic creaking, like the crane's mast was swaying. But there was no wind, and the crane's instruments showed dead calm. And then she saw lights in the fog, small, dim, yellow lights that bobbed and weaved, and they were arranged in pairs. And as they got closer, she realized with a surge of cold horror that the lights were eyes, dozens of pairs of eyes, and they were attached to shapes. Human-like shapes that were crawling up the boom, walking along the jib, skittering across the cables like spiders. And a voice, a chorus of voices, emanated from the fog itself, whispering, "The sky is our ocean. Maria, Elena, we drift on the currents. We feed on the solitude of the high places. We've been circling your crane for weeks, tasting your loneliness. And tonight we're hungry enough to come aboard." And the shapes began tapping on the glass of her cab, not breaking it, just tapping, a soft, patient tapping. And Maria Elena grabbed her phone to call for help, but the screen was filled with a crawling gray static, and the radio was playing music, an old song from the 1940s, a slow, crackling waltz, and the tapping grew louder, and the voice said, "Let us in. We'll only want to dance. We'll dance with you all night, and in the morning, when the fog lifts, you'll be one of us, a pair of yellow eyes in the mist." Floating over the city forever, and Maria Elena, a devout Catholic, began to pray the Hail Mary. Her grandmother's prayer, and the tapping paused, and the fog inside the cab began to recede, and the shapes outside drew back, and the voice hissed, "Not yet then, but the fog always returns. And so will we. We have your scent now. We have your name. We'll be in every cloud, every mist, every rainy morning when you climb that ladder. And one day you'll be too tired to pray, and we'll be waiting." And the fog rolled away, and the sun came up, and Maria Elena climbed down and quit that very morning. But she still lives in Seattle, and every time the fog rolls in, she locks her doors and windows and prays, and sometimes, on the stillest nights, she hears a faint tapping on her apartment window, 20 floors up, and she knows the fog is patient and the sky never forgets. Tucker Boone, a 38-year-old crane operator on a wind farm construction site in the Texas Panhandle, had the most dangerous job of all, lifting the massive turbine blades into place in winds that could gust to 50 miles an hour with no warning. And he was good at it, steady hands and a cool head. But on a clear, star-filled night in March, he was lowering an empty hook after placing the final blade of the day when the hook stopped, as if it had caught on something. But the load chart showed nothing. The hook was empty. The cables were clear. And the hoist motor groaned against a weight that shouldn't have been there. And Tucker peered down through the floor window and saw the hook swaying, and attached to it, by no visible means, was a shape, a distortion in the air, a shimmering man-sized emptiness that bent the starlight around it. And the load cell on his console registered a weight of 187 pounds, the exact weight of a human being, and a voice, not through the radio but directly in his head. A voice that felt like a cold needle in his brain said, "You hooked me, operator. You snagged my line. I've been hanging up here for 7 years. I was a lineman on this project. I fell from a turbine and no one saw. My body is still in the tall grass, but my soul got caught on the updraft, and I've been hanging in the air ever since. And you tonight, you're going to lower me down. You're going to put me in the ground where I belong." And Tucker, his mind reeling, tried to raise the hook. But the weight held steady, and the voice said, "No, down, only down. or I'll climb the cable and join you in the cab, and we can hang together forever." And Tucker, with no other choice, engaged the hoist and lowered the hook, slowly, down through the dark air. And as the hook descended, the shimmering shape became more distinct. A man's outline, arms outstretched, and when the hook touched the ground, the shape stepped off and faded into the earth, and the load cell registered 0, and Tucker sat in the cab, shaking until the sun came up. And the next day he searched the tall grass at the base of the turbine and found a rusted hard hat with the name Leon written in faded marker. And he turned it in to the site supervisor, and the supervisor went pale and said that Leon had been a rigger who vanished 7 years ago. They thought he'd just walked off the job, but no, he'd been there the whole time, waiting for a hook to catch him, and Tucker still works the wind farms. But every time he lowers an empty hook at night, he watches for the shimmer, and he always says a quiet rest easy, Leon, because the sky holds on to things, and sometimes it takes a crane operator to bring them home. Janelle Rourke, a 33-year-old tower crane operator in Oklahoma City. Oklahoma had been through her share of prairie thunderstorms, the kind that boiled up out of nowhere and turned the sky into a strobe-lit battlefield of lightning and hail. And she'd followed protocol every time. Secure the load. Unlock the slew brake so the crane could weather vane and climb down as fast as possible. But on a July evening, the storm came so fast, she didn't have time to descend, and she was trapped in the cab while the crane swayed and rocked. And lightning was striking all around, hitting the lightning rods on the surrounding buildings. Then it hit her crane. It's a direct strike that lit up the cab like a supernova and knocked her unconscious. And when she woke up, the storm had passed. The city was quiet, and she was alive, miraculously alive. But something was wrong, because the crane's shadow, cast by the rising moon onto the building across the street, was not the shadow of a crane. It was the shadow of something else, something massive and twisted, with far more arms than a crane should have. The shadow was moving, the arms flexing and curling. And Janelle realized with a sick falling feeling that the shadow was not being cast by the crane. It was being cast by her, by the thing that had been inside the lightning, the thing that had jumped from the bolt into her body. And it was still there, curled up inside her like a parasite, and a voice, not out loud but inside her bones, said, "I was born in the storm, Janelle. I've been leaping from strike to strike for 1,000 years, but I've never found a host as strong as you. You took the full bolt and you survived, and now we're together, you and I, and we're going to do wonderful things. We're going to reach up into the clouds and pull down more of my kind, and we'll fill the sky with our shadows. And you'll be the mother of a new storm, the queen of the lightning." And Janelle looked at her hands, and she saw that her fingers were faintly glowing, a blue electric hum, and she knew the thing inside her was real. And she did the only thing she could think of. She climbed down the crane, walked to the nearest hospital, and told them she'd been struck by lightning, and they ran tests, and they found nothing. But the shadow followed her, a twisted, many-armed thing that appeared on every wall, every sidewalk, every time the light hit her just right. She's learned to live with it, to hide it. But during every thunderstorm, the thing inside her stretches and purrs, and it whispers, "Soon, Janelle. Soon we'll go back to the crane, and we'll call down the biggest bolt yet, and we'll fill the whole sky with our children." And Janelle has moved far away from Oklahoma to a place where storms are rare. But she knows the lightning will find her again, because the thing inside her is patient, and the storm never forgets its own. 5 operators. 5 nights that rewrote their understanding of reality. From faceless climbers scaling the mast, to voices trapped in radio waves. From fog that walked to lightning that left a passenger. These stories prove that the high places are not always empty. If you've ever looked up at a tower crane and wondered what it's like up there now, you know. And maybe you wish you didn't. I want to thank Caleb, DeAndre, Maria, Elena, Tucker, Janelle, and every operator who's ever shared a story over a cold coffee at 3 a.m. If you have a job site horror story of your own, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more true terror from the edges of the working world, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. We're a small channel building a community around real fear, and every subscription is a signal boost into the dark. Stay safe on the climb, keep your radio on, and never, ever answer a voice that knows your name when you're 250 feet in the air.